Welcome back to the Motorcyclist Podcast. This is where we talk about motorcycles and what makes them great. Topics on the show are constantly changing, but what remains every time is two-wheeled fun. On this episode, we are talking about Chinese motorcycles. This one should get the comments jumping. We're going to talk about what's going on with Chinese manufactured motorcycles in the market right now. We're going to talk about the past. We're going to talk about what's going on currently, and then we're going to talk about what we think is going to happen in the future with these things. But before we get into all that, we are going to do our normal introductions. As always, we've got editor Adam Wahid, we've got associate editor Evan Allen, and you've got myself, executive editor Justin Dawes. We always start these things off with what everyone's been riding this week. So let's do the same thing. Adam, what have you been riding? I know it's cool and a lot of people want to know about it.
I've been riding the beloved BMW R1300 GS. Yes, another variation. This is the all street bike variation with the street bike tires. And this one has the auto leveling suspension. And just, wow, what a awesome bike. Just, I can't get enough of riding those bikes. Every time I ride that thing, I'm just like, can it get any better? And it does, but they're just awesome.
We're always singing the praise of that bike. And, probably the audience is like, yeah, we know. But if you're a hater, go ride one, go test ride one, go to a BMW dealership, ride one. You may never buy one. You may have no interest, but hey, go take a free test ride and see what we're talking about. Maybe you'll understand where we're coming from, right? So
that's a really good idea, with the summertime, bike events, Sturgis, and just Laconia Bike Week and all the different motorcycle events that are coming up this spring and summer. Now is a great time to, sign up for a test ride, do a demo ride, try out a bike, even if it's not a BMW Motorrad bike.
Yeah. Summertime test rides, demo trucks. If you've never done it, it's awesome. Go to an event. Usually there's manufacturers there with their most important models, if not all their models. You go, you sign up, they give you a time slot, you hop on a bike, you go for a ride on a motorcycle that's not yours, and you get to see if you like it or not. And also dealerships have demo bikes on their fleets, but they also get the demo trucks at dealerships sometimes. So check your local dealerships. Maybe, the BMW or Harley or, Kawasaki, Yamaha, whatever is going to show up at your local dealership for the weekend with the semi truck full of bikes for you to try out. So check it out. It's worthwhile, and you may never have interest in actually buying a bike, but put your butt on a seat, check out the new stuff, and who knows, maybe you will buy a bike, maybe you won't, but still you get the opportunity to see what we are talking about with all these new motorcycles. Right? Yeah. So Evan, what about you? What have you been riding?
Yesterday I was out riding some two-stroke dirt bikes. So I was on a 2025 Beta X Trainer. It's like a 300 two-stroke off-road and hard enduro model, but kind of their entry-level model. It's a little bit cheaper, a little bit lower end components, super soft suspension, but it was great for me with little two-stroke experience and little hard enduro experience. It's like a perfect get your feet wet in hard enduro, and I think it's their most inexpensive model.
Mm-hmm. So for sure.
At least one of them. Yeah. So
the 300 I think they have a 250 as well. So maybe the 250 is a little less expensive, and the bike is like a 7/8 size bike too, right? It's not as big as a normal enduro bike. It's a little bit smaller. It's not noticeably smaller. It's not like, oh, that thing's tiny, but it does help out, especially if you're learning to ride or smaller stature or in hard enduro stuff where it's, a big bike sometimes gets in the way.
Yeah. You need to put your foot out and
Yeah. So, and Evan, you're not a fan of riding off-road, or are you getting there in terms of hard enduro stuff?
Oh, I like it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I've definitely had some meltdowns on the trail before, but
he has had some meltdowns. We used to take him out on some of the local hard enduro trails, and he was just like, "This is dumb." But
yeah,
do it enough.
To be fair, I was always on a motocross bike.
Yeah,
which are already stiff for me, and because this suspension on the X Trainer is so soft that it me weighing 125 pounds, it was perfect for a hard enduro. Just roll over rocks super easily. fast speed stuff, a little too soft, you'll bottom out or blow through the stroke. But yeah, for going and doing first gear rock crawls and stuff like that, it was nice to get on something that's kind of purpose built for it and be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, this is how it's supposed to be. Yeah,
it made it easier. Not that it was easy, and not that I didn't struggle, but
yeah,
the right tool for the job.
Did you ride with Andrew Oldar? Andrew Oldar is our editor of Dirt Rider, our dirt bike outlet. Did you ride with Oldar?
No, Andrew wasn't there, but he would have been. It's good to have. He's former factory trials rider. He's teammates with Cody Webb, so the guy, I've seen him do crazy stuff, even on big bikes. Like, you don't even think it's possible to go up, and then he just starts going for it. It's like,
he's amazing to watch him ride. He definitely schools everybody. There's been rides where we've been on, like, I think it was a dual sport shootout in Moab, and there were some sections like he had to ride almost everybody's bike up the hill over the big rocks, because it was like rocks that were like car size that we had to go up, and everyone's just like, how do we do that? And he's like, here, give me the bike, and he was just like pop pop pop, like it was nothing. So super awesome, super rad. Okay, so for me, I'm not riding anything this week. I'm getting ready to head to Spain to ride the Street Fighter V2 and V4. I'm going to do both bikes at a press launch, one day on the street with the V2 and one day on the track with the V4. So looking forward to that. I have always been a fan of the Street Fighters. Really enjoyed them from the very beginning. I think one of my first moto journalist jobs was riding a Street Fighter, but it was the 796 or something like that, and that was in 2009 or 2010, long time ago. But it was my first press launch that I was an editor at, and it was, so I have a fondness for those things, and they're just super fun. It's a more comfortable Panigale is always the way to fly for me. So I'm really looking forward to riding the new one. New engine in the V2, and of course the V4 is just bonkers. So when was the last time you rode a Street Fighter, Adam?
I believe the last time we operated that vehicle was for the 2022 model year, 2021 model year, I believe. Maybe 2021 model year. Yeah, I think they had some hopped up Street Fighter V4S with a bunch of accessories that totaled $48,000 at the time. Ooh. So yeah, that was really fun. It had the dry clutch accessory and the Termignoni exhaust and these high performance rider rear sets and just a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah, that was the last time.
Nice. Well, it's gonna be a good time. Packing 2 days of testing into 2 bikes into 2 days of testing is going to be hectic. But it should be good. We're going to Almeria, Spain. They have really good roads along the coast, and then of course there's a track there that will be plenty fun. And it looks to be dry, which is better than lately. A lot of press launches have been getting a lot of rain and getting rained out. So looking forward to that. So we're going to get into this thing about Chinese bikes. Audience, please put your comments down below. Let us know what you think about Chinese-made motorcycles. Would you buy one? Do any brands interest you? Do you think they're terrible? Let us know. Put your comments down below. We expect that there'll be a lot of conversation in the comments for this one. Before we get into it, I want to preface this by saying we're not going to get into the politics of global trade, tariffs, how China's manufacturing industry works. We're not scholars in those areas. We're motorcyclists. We talk about motorcycles and we know about bikes. And so we're coming from a place of, does a bike work? Is it good or is it not? And that's it. So we'll stay in our lane there. We're going to talk about our comments on the products, good, bad, whatever. And it's up to you to decide how you want to spend your money. If you want to buy products from other countries or whatever, that's up to you. We're just going to tell you if they're good or not. And that's it. We're going to leave the politics completely out of this. I assume they're going to be in the comments, and that's fine. But us, we're just not skilled enough to talk about that. I don't have an economics degree. I don't have a geopolitics degree. I have a degree in burning tires and doing wheelies, as does Adam and Evan. Right, guys?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Top of the class.
Okay. Top of the class. So anyway, so we're gonna get into it. Let's talk about we're gonna go like past, present, future in this one. So let's talk about like the past, like when Chinese motorcycles started showing up at places, and it wasn't even at dealerships most of the time, right? It was cheap knockoffs that were like sold out of a strip mall on the side of the highway, where like fly by night dealers in quotations, because most of them didn't have franchises or business, like maybe barely a business license. They were buying these in containers full of bikes, right? And then they would assemble them, sometimes completely wrong, and throw them out on the curb with an insanely low price that would get people to buy them. But they came usually with no warranties, no spare part services, poor quality control, and it was just kind of like the Wild West, and it probably wasn't a good look. I mean, Evan, you were probably just a kid, so you probably, like, your friends were riding some of those hunks of chunks, yeah?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I was a kid when the pit bike scene was going crazy, and especially the Chinese ones. And I know it was a press unit my dad brought home from Cycle World. It was called a Falcon. It was like, I think it was like a 138 cc, like souped up pit bike type of thing, but it barely ever ran. And when it did, the foot pegs would fall off. Like, you couldn't get more than 20 minutes in without the foot pegs falling off. It was like the foot pegs were connected by this one piece bar that would like mount to the bottom of the frame. It was like this, and you would always just end up losing them, and the bolts would strip or they wouldn't seat right. They just, it wasn't super high quality, but it was fun. It was pretty peppy. So,
right. What about you, Adam? What was your initial, like, what are your impressions of the past of those things?
I mean, kind of like you called it, I kind of laughed when you're like buying the container loads of the bikes and selling them on Craigslist. And yeah, like, honestly, the thought that pops up in my mind is just going to Pep Boys.
Pep Boys. Man. I remember Pep Boys had all these crazy bikes. Boys. Yeah. Remember there was a brand, it was called like, it was basically like a Yamaha knockoff of kids' bikes, right? So they had like a little four-wheeler and a little like 50, and it was like Yamamoto instead of Yamaha or something like that. But it was the same font. It was blue and white, and I think Yamaha sued the crap out of them. But it was the time where they would just shut shop, and then they would just change the name of their company and sell the same stuff under a different name if they already weren't selling it under 50 different names, right? And so, the same thing with you buying one at a strip mall from a dealer that had only Chinese things, and you would go there, buy the bike, and then the thing would break. You go back next week, and the place would be shuttered and gone. So it was definitely a wild time, and it was pretty rough, and I think it probably ruined motorcycling for a lot of people that thought that was the normal experience of motorcycling, was these things are just lame and it's too much work, and it's probably hard to tell how many riders we lost in those days to crappy knockoff motorcycles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in those days, like, even then people were saying, well, that's like, it's just like Japan in the 50s and 60s, but not really. Like, Japan was making cheap and expensive bikes, and some were copies of other things, but they also had their own clean sheet designs, and they were already, even in those days, like, breaking out into their own engineering and their own thing, rather than just blatantly ripping stuff off, right? So I think that when people make the analogy from Chinese bikes and Japanese bikes in the 60s, and this is happening now, in a way, yes, but in a way, no. And maybe that path has changed as we get talking into the present. But my take on it is it's not really the same evolution. It's a different evolution, but it is happening, the evolution, right?
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts about the old days of Chinese stuff?
I know what you were saying about it could ruin motorcycling for people. I remember as a kid with the Falcon, is thinking like, do you have to work on these things more than you actually get to ride them? Like it was like put in 2 hours of working on the thing, get 20 minutes out of riding it. So yeah, I can see that discouraging people.
Yep. And the other thing is, back in those days, it was almost all small kids bikes. It wasn't a lot of big motorcycles, right? Mm-hmm. I would say probably 10 years ago, there was a brand that they're still around. I believe CSC, I think is the name of them.
I've heard of them.
Chinese manufactured bikes. I believe Chinese, they may be Taiwan, but anyway, they kind of were better quality, and like you bought one and it was a decent experience, but most of the time they were little bikes for little kids, parents that maybe weren't so much into motorcycling and didn't know any difference between a Yamaha and a Yamamoto. And so they bought the thing and they're just like, yeah, screw this. It's easier to take my kid and do soccer or, skateboarding or BMX or something else besides moto, because this thing's a hunk of junk and it never works and it's a pain in the butt. And I don't have the mechanical aptitude to keep it going, so screw it.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the history. It's not real in depth, and it was just like swap meet stuff. So, but that's not the case right now. And right now is quite different. Right?
Yeah, things are getting nice for sure.
Yeah. So Chinese bikes are coming on strong. They are becoming, we'll say they are becoming choices for some people that are value choices. So the number of Chinese motorcycles in the US is still pretty low. The number of bikes sold from China are still pretty low. But in countries like the EU, countries, I should say, all of Europe, pretty much, in Latin American and Asian, they are capturing huge chunks of market share. They are going like gangbusters, and they are, starting to eclipse some larger Japanese brands, especially like Suzuki. Like they're catching up, like CF Moto, doing it big time. But in Europe, there's also all these other brands that you see riding around, and they don't look half bad. Like they may still have some little bits off here and there, but overall, they're kind of legitimate motorcycles now. So there are still copies. There's still crappy copies, and they're almost comical. Like you see some of the sport bikes that we put on the website every once in a while. They're just like, look at this copy of a Panigale, and it's like a 400 that has bigger wings than a MotoGP bike on it, and they don't quite get it, right? And those are the same companies most of the time that were doing the junky little bikes. But there's lots of brands that are now innovating. They're building their own power plants, or they're even building power plants for established manufacturers, right? So I think we're going to go over some of the brands. We're going to talk about that, and then we'll get into what we think about for the future. But so the first one is QJ Motors. Not a name brand in the US. No one knows about them, but there are some brands you probably know that QJ Motors owns: Benelli and Morbidelli. So they are kind of buying these defunct Italian name brands, and then they're building bikes in China under those name brands, but they're building like decent parallel twin motorcycles, adventure bikes, street bikes, with some styling that is pretty solid, and they're not total hunks of junk. The dealer penetration or the amount of dealerships are very small still. but the bikes themselves don't look half bad, you know. And then QJ Motors is partnered with MV Agusta to use some of their engine designs in their bike. So they have a 921cc, or they call it the 921 super bike, you know, and it kind of looks like a super veloce. It's got a round headlight. It's kind of got that styling on it. So they're building that, and then they actually have partnered with Harley Davidson as well, which is how about that, right?
Wow.
So they're building the X350. It's a small 350 single. It is sold all in mainly Asian markets, China, but there are some units here in the US, but you can't buy them. They're used for motorcycle training schools at Harley Davidson's.
Okay.
So you could go to a Harley Davidson dealership and do rider training, and instead of, you know, they're getting rid of all their old Buells and street 500s and things like that, and they're replacing them with these 350 X350 trainers. So, you know,
yeah, that's a big seller, right, for Harley in those markets. That one does well.
Yeah, in other markets, absolutely, because big bikes in smaller, I won't say smaller, but in places where they lean towards smaller displacements, yeah, they do really well. I mean, even a 350 in some countries is a large motorcycle.
Totally,
right?
Yeah. You're styling.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. I mean, you go, you know, where I spend most of my time in Costa Rica, 350 street bike is a big bike. You know, everything's 200s, 250s, 190s. You know, in my eyeballs, I see a lot of Chinese bikes here where I live in Costa Rica. There's a brand called Formula, and they build like a dual sport that is basically a knockoff of an XR. You know, like you could probably take most of the Honda parts and put them on the Formula, and they would fit. So still, copies are out there, very much so. And especially in like Latin America and some Asian countries. So but QJ Motors, they've got, you know, they're bigger than you would think, even though you've probably never heard of them. Then there's a company called Lonson. Lonson actually builds the engines for the BMW Parallel Twins.
It's cool.
You know, so F900, F850, you know, 800, etc. down the line from like, I think they started doing it with the 650s. So it's been probably, almost 10 years of building engines, maybe longer.
Wow.
But they've been building engines for BMW, you know, and go ahead.
They would build they build the engine for the F900. Was it the GS Trophy, that adventure bike? A new one? Wow.
Yeah, for the F900 GS.
And the F9, is it called the F900, the naked bike they have too?
Yep. The F900 R, and then the you know, all the F900 bikes basically. XR, F900 XR or whatever it is. Like, yeah, all those bikes, Chinese built engine. And then, so, you know, when people when there's criticism of Chinese things being manufactured as junk, absolutely, there's tons of examples of that, but there's also examples of larger companies entrusting other companies to build something for them, and obviously they have employees embedded within those companies at the factories, making sure that it's up to their standards. But you know, it's being done, right? So you know, these brands like we're talking about here, like none of us really have any experience riding. We haven't ridden them, but the next brand that we're going to talk about, we've all ridden them. Evan's ridden two of them. I've ridden two of them. And Adam, you've ridden one of them. So that's a new company that started maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Yeah, maybe 2022 or late 21, something like that.
Yeah, that's Cove. COVE, Cove, which is funny because they started with another name, Colove or something like that, and then they changed it to Cove. But this brand is a brand that's doing their kind of own designs. Like they're building their own bikes. They are using some engine architecture from some other Chinese manufacturing, but then they're modifying the heads and that kind of stuff, and then they're building their own frames and stuff. So all of us have ridden their 450 rally bike. They're building a 450 rally bike that starts at $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And
like,
they race it. And they race it. They
race it.
Yeah, at Dakar. I think I know Mason Klein had some issues with his, but maybe 2 years ago. But they had a team of Chinese rally racers that both bikes finished the whole thing.
Yeah, the first year. I think that was 2022.
Okay, sounds right. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, 2022 or 23. I always get confused because it starts at the beginning of the year. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes the preparation, they're in 22 and then they go to 23. But they had 3 Chinese riders and all 3 of them finished. And I mean, they weren't vying for a podium or anything like that, but they finished, and that right there was the goal for them. And then they hired Mason Klein, but it was a very last minute thing with Mason's first year. He got on a prototype bike that hadn't been tested a lot, and someone that is at the skill level of Mason Klein, he's going to put so much more stress on a motorcycle than they would ever expect. And so he broke and he was out of the race, and it was a bummer. And then the same thing happened, this year. He, started off hot. He was like, killing it in some stages, like podium on some stages, and then his bike broke again. So they got some teething issues, but, personally, we've all ridden them. What did you guys think of the bike as a whole?
The rally?
Mm-hmm.
I really liked it. Yeah, it was super capable. I had an issue with, we had, 2 bikes? I had an issue with one of them with it having a gearbox issue that happened later in the day. I know the bikes have been ridden pretty hard through Baja before we got our hands on them. But other than that, the thing worked well, like jumping it, blowing up berms or sand dunes. The suspension was good. The engine, I remember wishing it had more bottom end. It's kind of more of a mid to top end engine. But I think for me, other than just having that gearbox issue, I really enjoyed it.
Yep. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, I liked it. It was really fun. Honestly, the thing I liked most about it was just riding in the Dumont Dunes where we rode in the California-Nevada border. That was super fun, and it's cool that someone makes just a bike like that just out of the box. You don't have to mod it. You don't have to do anything. You just go buy it and ride it. So I enjoyed that bike. It's cool. I would think that sector would be a little bit more popular than what it is. It's always surprising to me that KTM doesn't offer a vehicle in that segment. I mean, they do, but not for a normal man's price.
Not for a normal man's price. Like that's the thing. You can go buy a KTM rally replica, $50,000. There's 100 of them made every year. Honda through Red is doing a rally bike. It's the same thing. It's $50,000. This thing, you could buy 5 of them for that same price if you bought the lower end. They have different steps. So they have like the bottom of the barrel one, which is the one we rode, the base model. Still has like 8 gallons of fuel with saddle tanks, low tanks, a tank in the back, carbon fiber skid plate. It's got a TFT dash. It's got ride modes. You can turn ABS on and off. And then they go up to like a factory, which has like a carbon fiber tower on it, and it comes with all the mounting hardware to put on a road book, and has some other things done to it, different exhaust, titanium exhaust, and a bunch of stuff, and still very price competitive. I think like $13,500 or something like that. Longer travel suspension, but same thing. We all went out the same day and rode them to do photos and do videos, and I was very unsure how the day was going to go before we went. Right? It was like, well, dude's like, we may get there and everything's broken, and we break them all in 5 minutes, and we drive home, and we spent a whole day for naught, or they may be something that is entertaining, or they may be total junk or whatever. And I left impressed with the bike I rode. The bike I rode didn't have any problems. It didn't have the transmission problems that Evans did. But we will say that's a 50-50 split between the bikes we rode. So, but the handling of it was excellent. Like it had a suspension by a company called U-On on the bikes we rode. Now they've actually changed to KYB for the US models. So it's got KYB suspension, but it handles really well, feels like a rally bike, handles like a rally bike. Power wise, it's not a ripper of an engine. It feels more like a 350 than it does a 450. But they made a point that the engine's meant to have long service intervals, long oil changes, like 5,000 mile services on it. And it's meant to be like they're aiming it at like dual sporters or adventure bike people more than like rally racers for the most part.
Yeah.
And for that, I think it was excellent. And you see quite a lot of them out there being ridden now, especially with us in the industry. There's a lot of people that are industry adjacent that are buying them to do stuff with. And it's because I think that they're surprisingly good for what they are. So, yeah. In fact, I almost bought one myself, but
yeah, that's right.
And I changed my mind. But still, I think it's a fun motorcycle. It rides really well. It handles great. The engine is pretty good. I would much rather have that than a CRF 300 Rally by far.
Yeah.
So it's definitely more hardcore, more dirt worthy.
Yeah,
for sure.
More performance.
Yep.
And yeah, I remember when our stories, or whether it was on a comment somewhere, whether it was on YouTube, Instagram, the website, where there was comments about people being like, "Oh, I'm selling my T7, my Tenere 700 for this." And I mean, the Tenere 700 seems like one of the most popular middleweights right now, middleweight adventure bikes, and so people to be looking to get rid of that. Yeah.
So I mean, early adopters, they're doing it, they're trying it out. There's teething problems here and there, but it seems that most people that own them are decently happy with them. So that's a good start. And now they have a 800cc adventure bike as well that I rode for a very short time. Evan did a full test on it. So I'm going to let you talk about the 800X.
Yeah, I was really impressed with it. We rode it. It was, again, it was like we talked about earlier, it was part of their demo fleet that they were running at an adventure rally. And we got the keys for a day. And yeah, I was super impressed with it. And the performance side, it's got a 799cc parallel twin, like really similar to like the KTM platform. And that's what it reminded me of. Not even the engine, just like the whole platform in general was a lot like sort of like a 790, 890 adventure. The suspension was good. If you jump it or really hit stuff, it would blow through the stroke. But like the handling, the brakes were probably the best brakes I've ever experienced on an adventure bike. And it was like a brand I'd never heard of. Again, like I love the thing. The quick shifter was great. Switched through ride modes, like sliding corners. It really was an impressive bike. I think the only thing that I remember noticing that could be improved was maybe like a fueling issue. There just seemed like there was a flat spot in the mid-range. But I remember that bike was still kind of a prototype, wasn't a production model.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, the thing at $10,000, I definitely was like, man, I'd be down to have one of these. Yeah.
I mean, so it's OG Tenere 700 pricing with ride modes, with ABS, with TFT dash, quick shifter, like all the electronic goodies. I rode it for a very short time, for a few laps, and what really got me on that bike was how good the ergonomics were. The rider triangle was like perfect. Like I was expecting that a company that is not well versed in adventure bikes would definitely get that part of it wrong, and you'd stand up on the thing and the bars would be in your lap, or they'd be too far forward, or there'd be some weird thing sticking out and hitting your leg while you were standing up or something like that. And it was actually really, really spot on for sitting and standing, like really, really good rider cockpit.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with that. And the engine was, it was decently peppy. It did have some fueling issues, but like we said, that was a pre-production bike. But overall, I mean, it felt very KTM.
Yeah.
Like, and
yeah, it was interesting too, because we had a Tenere out there the same time, and I remember I rode the Tenere the day before, and on some of the same sections, and I before riding that, I thought if I'm going to spend 10 grand on an adventure bike, it'd probably be a Tenere. And then after riding the Cove, it was like the engine. There was just so many things about it that I liked more than the Tenere. And like you mentioned about the ergos, as a shorter rider, the ergos reminded me a little bit of the Honda Transalp, which I really like. A little bit more of a sit in the bike ergonomics.
Yeah. Oh, we lost Evan. Internet problems.
It's always something.
I think he's saying the F900 GS. So we'll get back to him on that. But overall, like, I think it's a good start for that company. I think there's maybe a decent future ahead of them if they can keep it rolling. Pretty overall solid bikes that are very surprising. And then the next company is basically the standout Chinese company, CF Moto. CF Moto has been around for quite a while. They started with ATVs and UTVs, and then they partnered with KTM to build stuff, and they actually use their engine design in some of their models. But they're also building some of their own stuff as well, 450 adventure bikes and stuff. And so they're really starting to make a mark. We're seeing a lot of them, right, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, at the local dealership, you wouldn't believe how many of those things they sell. It's wild. They always tell me that, the CF Moto bikes sell 2, 3, 4 to 1 compared to Yamaha, Kawasaki, or Honda, which is just crazy to me, So it's just they have a good price point, really good value, and that's what people are really into. It's just value and price point. They're a little bit more brand agnostic, so that's where CF Moto is really scoring some wins.
Yeah, they really are. They have a complete line at this point of all the way from mini bikes. Like they have like little, I think they're 125s or 150 mini bikes, the Papio. They've got, so they've got these kind of cool little bikes. Then they have, stuff that naked bike, the NK, which is kind of like a KTM Duke. And then you've got their 450 Ibex, which is really, really an awesome motorcycle. We're talking, a 450 adventure bike that is just about the right size. And a lot of people that also were looking at T7s are looking at this Ibex. Sure, it's got a less powerful engine and it's doesn't have quite the power, but it has the chassis and it's a really nice looking bike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember Bradley.
They look cool.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying they look cool.
Yeah, I haven't been on one, but Bradley, I remember he went on the press launch for it, and same thing. He was like, "Wow, it seems like it's almost that sweet spot of a capable off-road adventure bike. Maybe if the something like a Tenere is still a little bit too big, and you're really valuing off-road performance, this seems like the 450 is that sweet spot of having enough legs to do, highway and street riding, but then once you get it in the dirt, it's a smaller package that's going to be a little more capable. Yeah. That's what he had mentioned was, man, this could be take some Tenere sales.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it could take some Tenere sales, and it could also take some dual sport sales as well, especially like CRF 300Ls and that kind of stuff, right? You get a little more power, a little more adventure bike capability maybe to it. They look great. They look cool. And, they're doing it. So they're not available quite yet in the US, I don't think. Our press units won't show up until April for US testing. So as soon as we get one, we'll be doing some bigger, longer tests on them. So stay tuned for that. Maybe we'll have to revisit maybe that subject. But so CF Moto, like you said, full line. They have an 800cc adventure bike on the way as well, which is using the KTM 790 engine that they produce. So CF Moto has been building the 790 parallel twin, LC8C parallel twin, not the 890, but just the 790 for I think all the 790 models that are available, and then everything for Asian market. So they're doing that, but then you look at their adventure bike and it's very much kind of the same thing. It's got the saddle tanks and it's got different styling on it, but it's being offered at a more attractive price. And I think that's what CF Moto is doing well, is they're offering good value because they have a decent build quality. They seem to understand what our market is looking for in a motorcycle, something that's capable, has great value, and has all the features, and they're offering that, and they're killing it. I think they're knocking at the door of Suzuki for market share. Like I think they're closer. They have surpassed Suzuki in sales this year, that's big time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So overall, I think those are the ones that are worth talking about. All the other stuff is still peripheral or junk or copies. And so, Coves are cool to look at. CF Motors are cool to look at. Benelli, Morbidelli, Moto Morini is owned by a Chinese company now, but those bikes are actually designed in Milan. So they are still Italian, but they're built in China. Moto Marini's got some really cool bikes coming out, like the 3.5. They've got a new adventure bike coming out. They've got the X Cape, which is now going up to it was a 650. Now it's going to be a 700 for 2025. Very cool looking bike. Kind of middle of the road, not super hardcore, but a really nice looking motorcycle. And then they have a larger one coming out, which I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. So, it's happening. So let's talk about the future, because that leads us into, it's happening. They're gaining momentum. They're getting market share. People are paying attention to them. People are buying them now. Where do you guys see Chinese manufacturers in the future? Like, let's say just like 5 years. Let's start with like 5 years out. What's going to be different? Anything different? What do you guys think?
I think maybe what might be the biggest difference is that they're, how consumers or customers look at them as far as like reliability and stuff. Because I think that's probably the big question everyone has is you ride it on a single test, you do ride it for 2 days or something, but then, they work great. The ones I've been on, like, yeah, this thing, they're awesome. But I think there's just probably still that you have that in the back of your head, like, how will this thing work after 10,000 miles?
Yeah, that's a totally valid point and a totally valid concern for anyone that's looking at these bikes is, past track record of Chinese built stuff is terrible. It seems to be getting better, but there's still not a solid base to go off of for information in terms of that. So if you're getting one, you are an early adopter.
Yeah.
Right. You're taking a little bit of a chance for that value. Right.
Yeah. And so, I think as more people buy them, and then, 5 years from now, if they have a good track record, there's no big engine issues or anything, then I think that would be maybe the biggest step for them is changing that, that look. And then people are like, okay, I'll get, almost it becomes like a Japanese bike maybe, where you don't think about the reliability as much, and then see more of them on the road.
Yeah. What about you, Adam?
I mean, Evan, he called it. I mean, there's just a lot of bad stereotypes that, Chinese power sports vehicles aren't well made and they'll break down, which is, I understand it, but like, think about all the other things that we use every day that are made in China. Like a lot of the things we use every day in our household and in business is made in China, and that stuff doesn't break. So, it's going to take, some years for that stereotype to be weeded out. But, companies like CF Moto are definitely on track to change change what people think and make that stereotype go away. too, if CF Moto can continue expanding its U.S. dealer presence and just expand its dealer network, get these products inside dealerships alongside, their Japanese competition, let people see them, touch them, ride them, that's going to change real soon. So I only see them, growing their market share,
Yeah, I also see them growing. I think they do have a stigma and a image problem that they have to overcome. I think CF Moto has already licked that for the most part. I think CF Moto has gotten over that hump, but the rest haven't. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in 5 years. But I think it'll be still growing. And I think because they're offering things at value and they're innovating with their own models now, I would say that they're building their own things. Like you look at company Great Wall. So it's a car company that is now starting to build motorcycles as well. And they built a flat 8 touring bike. So like a Goldwing competitor, but it's an 8-cylinder instead of a 6, it's very interesting. And hopefully one day we'll get a test ride on one. But I mean, they're trying things and they're not sticking to the status quo, which is pretty interesting. And I think that may help, but at the same time, if they go the way of the Chinese car companies, which we don't in the US, we don't see any Chinese car companies for the most part. But you go into other countries like Australia, South Africa, here in Latin America, Chinese car companies are murdering the legacy brands, like just killing it. I think in Australia, the company's called Haval. They're like the number 3 or 4 manufacturer. Like they're battling with Toyota and all these other companies for big market share now because they're offering vehicles that have a lot of features, like at a more competitive price. And so that's how they're going to make their bones, which is the same way that the Japanese did back in the days, is they offered bikes that worked well at a decent price and offered a lot of stuff. So I think that's the way it's going to go, and it's accelerating. There's going to be more and more lower priced alternatives with all the features you're looking for in the future. And I think maybe 5 years, more people will be talking about it. And in 10 years, I think brands like CF Moto will be, especially CF Moto probably, will be on the level of, of the other large brands we talk about. They won't be an outlier anymore. I don't think, that's our personal opinion. We're not economists, and but the way that we see it and the way that we've experienced these models, why not, right? So they're coming. And then it, like we said, it comes down to, if people are willing to buy motorcycles from China or not. You never know. The global economics is shifting quickly, and so something may happen and we may never see Chinese motorcycles in the US. You don't know. So but talking on bikes themselves, on the merits of the bikes, I think they have a future.
Yeah, I agree. Especially CF Moto. I mean, they have a presence in the MotoGP scene. They got Moto3, Moto2 teams. And I remember at one point they teased a motocross bike. I think they're working on on a motocross
bike. I've heard rumors of people that have seen it, and they're saying it's meant to be a motocross bike, but not a race bike.
Oh, okay. More of a recreational dirt bike.
It's a recreational motocross bike.
Okay. Wow.
If that makes sense. So it's for,
not really, but
it's going to be for the people that just like to go ride motocross but aren't racers.
Trying to race, yeah.
Right. So it's not going to be as powerful. It's not going to be as fast. It's going to be a lot cheaper.
Yeah, so nice.
We'll see. Yeah. I've heard rumors, but they're only rumors. So we haven't really reported on it because I don't have any hard or fast details other than the rumor mill.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we can talk about here in the podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I guess it just shows that they're looking at every aspect of the motorcycling scene and categories and stuff, and I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, very much so. So, okay, last thing I'll talk about is personal choices. Would you ever put a Chinese motorcycle, as we've experienced them to this point, would you put one in your garage?
I don't think I would quite yet. I think I would. I think I would wait for. Yeah, I think for me, I would want to see a couple more years of them making stuff and see what the reliability's like, and not that I doubt them, but also too, I'd have to look at what models, compare some of their models to Japanese or Europe brands, because I think Honda offers some pretty affordable, like there's some of the Japanese manufacturers offer some really good bikes where maybe even KTM with their 390 platform, or the Huskies too. I really like that. And those are really competitively priced. So I think right now for me, I think I'd be willing to fork up, $1,000 more for something that I know is proven.
Fair. Yep. What about you, Adam?
I would potentially buy the Cove rally bike. I mean, no one makes that bike at that price point. So if I wanted a vehicle for that type of application, I would totally buy that bike. But that said, the CF Moto bikes that they make, there's not really an application that I would really want. I mean, maybe the Ibex 450, but I haven't really ridden it, so I don't really know. But the Cove 450, I would potentially buy that bike. Yeah. If I wanted to do rally bike riding,
sure.
Not street bike riding, not just hardcore rally bike riding, Cove 450 for sure. But realistically, I would probably want a more versatile bike like a KTM 890 Adventure R or Tenere 700. You know? But
I'm kind of mirroring both of you guys. I think in a way, like cautiously, like maybe not, but at the same time, the Cove, like Adam said, the 450, I almost bought one. So if it hadn't been for some personal things, I would have probably had one in my garage. So I will say same thing. It fills a slot that nobody else is able to fill at the moment. Like, sure, you could go get a 500 KTM and put a rally tower on it and that kind of stuff, but like it comes with larger tanks. It comes with it comes with all the things that you need in order to do rally that is not available on anything else. So it fills a hole perfectly. So Cove 450, absolutely, I put one in my garage. Everything else, maybe not yet. But in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, we might be changing our tunes. We might not know. We don't know. So, but as the facts are now, Chinese motorcycles are gaining ground. There's more and more of them out there that are becoming better. There's still plenty of junk out there too. So I would say, our closing thoughts are, it's not all junk. Look at it for yourself. Go check one out and make your own decisions. We have our opinions. We've ridden them. We've ridden so many bikes. We're knowledgeable. And there's some standout models that we do like. CF Moto Ibex 450, the Cove 450, even the Cove 800X, cool bike. So there's some bikes definitely worth looking at. So do that. So that's going to be it for this episode. So let us know your comments. Put them down below. You're going to have tons of feedback on this one, and we're good with that. Let's talk about it. Let's engage in the comments, and we really appreciate your support. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.